Boo! Not budget enough. Boo! Use a CH160 instead, it's better. Boo! You never called my mum back. Well, how about this then, lads? 450 bloody quid. Okay, so this CH160 case, it's alright. Truth be told, it's a bit of a pain to build in. There's this front panel bar with all your front I/O which goes over the GPU. It's a bit awkward, you just take that out in order to build it. The cable management is basically non-existent, and despite this being a budget case, it's really intended for SFX power supplies, which is a bit of a shame. But that said, once it is built, I think it's a tidy little unit that gives a premium look without being too expensive. I'll be doing a separate review video for the case, so I won't go into too much more detail here. I'll just say that at £55, it is stonking value for an ITX chassis. So up on the screen is the parts list, and we'll dive into this a bit more later. But how's the performance? Well, sir, I don't actually know, because I'll let you into a little YouTube secret. I'm recording this before actually testing the PC, so why don't we play a fun game? I'm going to guess the performance now, and then we'll see if I'm right later on. Fine, so for temperatures, my guess is CPU 70C max with 60C plateau, that's in Prime 95, and the actual result is Fortnite 1080p competitive. I reckon about 180 FPS. Apex 1080p high settings, yeah, I'll bite for about, let's say 110 FPS. And Cyberpunk 2077, 1080p medium, I think 50 FPS. All right, how did I do? Hopefully I got it pretty accurate. Now, you might be wondering why I chose some of these seemingly random components. Okay, son, let me tell you. Like I said, I spent 450 quid on this whole thing, but it's a bit of cheeky truth bending because a lot of these parts are inherited. It's a hodgepodge of different parts from an old test bench that I don't use anymore, and there's a couple of new parts in there as well. I used eBay to look for the average sale prices over the last couple of months, and that's given me the prices that you see in the list today. So you can get AM4 CPUs pretty cheap now, you can get DDR4 pretty cheap now. The thing you're going to find difficult is getting a cheap ITX motherboard that's compatible really with any generation. So what's actually in our lineup? So let's start with the CPU. Ryzen 5 5600G, 6-core, 12-thread, blah, 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 blah. I had this left over from the old technician bench that I told you about earlier. But if you're building it yourself, just get the Ryzen 5 3600 instead. The feature set is better and it avoids a lot of the problems that you get with the 5600G. But the 5600G, it will give all right performance. However, it is limited to PCIe 3 and only 8 lanes, so that might mean that we lose a modest 5% or so performance from our graphics card, which is the RTX 3050 8GB. Got it new at £175 and just went for the cheapest one. I can hear your beleaguered moans already. It's trash, blah, 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 yes. Well, you know, I sell these PCs through my business, and as much as it sucks and as much as you will get a better value from AMD and Intel, the fact remains, Nvidia sells. My Radeon systems take at least 3 times as long to sell, even though they're better value. If you're going for a similar vibe for your own build, a good new alternative would be a Radeon RX 6600, or if you're going used, you could easily snag a 5700 XT for the same amount of money, and that's going to give you excellent performance. Back to the 3050 though, I literally just got the cheapest one. It's so low power, the 3050, that the really cheap models like this Palette Storm X are going to be absolutely fine. This is perfectly fine for 1080p gaming and a bit of streaming alongside, but not really much more than that. And also guys, never buy the 6GB version of the 3050. That thing is hot garbage, and it's actually worse than just the VRAM would suggest. One thing that is not hot garbage though is the CPU cooler. Wraith Prism. Bit of a throwback, eh? For this tier of CPU, this means you're going to be perfectly set. I just had this laying around, but guys, even the Wraith Stealth is going to see you right here, and those things are readily available for like £5 or so. I also chucked in 2 120mm fans that I had spare and set them up in a back to front airflow path. Okay, motherboard next. Bog standard A520 ITX ASRock board, absolutely fine. I had to use a USB 2 to USB-C front panel adapter to make that front USB-C work, but that is optional and you don't have to do it. With this board, you could upgrade all the way to a Ryzen 7 5800X3D if you wanted, and you've got room in the case for a bigger cooler to accommodate this if that's what you wanted to do. The only problem is that the board would limit you to PCIe version 3. So my advice is, if you're trying to do this build yourself, if you have a bit of extra money, put that into getting a B550 ITX motherboard, which will be worth it in the long run and gets you that PCIe 4 connectivity, which gets more important the higher spec you go. The higher the graphics card, the more important that PCIe 4 specification is. Now the power supply. Old reliable Corsair TX750M. In truth, this is overkill. The reason it's in here is because I had it on my test bench and there was no point selling it just to get something else at the same price. If you're building your own, you could use a 500 watt unit, absolutely no problem, though with a 650 watt, you would have more upgrade flexibility for the future. A modular power supply is helpful in this case, but if you're really hard up, a non-modular could work. You're just going to have to spend a bit longer on the cable management. In that case, I definitely recommend sticking with a 500 watt unit, because on those non-modular power supplies on the lower wattages, there's actually going to be fewer cables and it's going to make it easier for you to manage. The RAM is bog standard DDR4 3200 speed. Nothing to write home about here. You should be able to grab these for about 30 quid or so. The SSD is a bog standard Gen 3 NVMe 1TB, but it does have memory buffering, so it's not like those horrible super low spec ones that actually gum your system up. If you have the money, get your storage new, because you don't know how long it's been hammered away in someone's system, particularly with some cryptocurrencies using storage. Don't forget that SSDs and storage drives as a whole actually do have a theoretical maximum lifespan. So overall, I like how this turned out. It's not perfect by any means, but when you're in the budget end, there's going to be compromises, guys. It's just the way it is. So my lesson for today is, don't get too bogged down in the minutiae, especially on a budget. Just get it done and get on with some gaming. One of the benefits of a build like this is that there is room to upgrade over time. And whilst yes, the full-size power supply does get in the way a bit, if you're on this kind of budget now, you're likely to be in this same budget category for a little while to come. You'll get more room if you splash out for an SFX unit, but I'd say if budgets are tight, stick with ATX. If you want to learn more about the CH160 case, I've done a full review and that is linked down below. And there are some awesome teardown videos from a bunch of cool channels out on YouTube as well. Machines and More is actually one of my favorites. I've talked for way too long now, so bye.